All right. So last week, all of you guys know, somebody that may be watching live on Facebook, there's a technical difficulty after I started the teaching, or actually when I finished the teaching, I clicked save, and all of a sudden Facebook deleted. So it doesn't know how to save. So don't ever depend on it to save you, okay? But that doesn't happen too often. But a lot of people watch this later on. People live around the other side of the world or whatever, and they watch it later on. And so it's important to have this as part of my series in YouTube also. And so I just thought, well, I'll just teach it over. For those who have never watched this before, we're teaching out of the book of Romans. I'm going through it verse by verse, sometimes 2 or 3 verses or whatever. And I'm unveiling the book of Romans. And what I mean by unveiling, there's been a veil put on the book of Romans and all the Bible. And that veil is the false translations that were made by the translators, and also the false perceptions of the translators, and also many of the authors of the books of the Bible. And so we're in a time, Kay calls it the age of Aquarius, Kay Fairchild, where there's some real great understanding coming. And it's just amazing to me how so many people all over the world are really seeking spiritual truth, and they're hungry, and they come to an end of what religiosity taught to them. And I'm not saying all churches are bad, and the leaders are not bad. They're just doing what they've always done. And I don't think anybody would purposely deceive us. I do think they did back though when they translated the Bible. So it's been exciting. And then we ended up in chapter 8. And I discovered, and I found online where many people said chapter 8 is the most powerful book in the Bible. And so I decided to look for some pillars of truth. Brother Garner taught 7 pillars of truth when he taught the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. So I came up with 34. So, I've always been accused of always hold on just a second, something happened here. I've been accused of being a long-winded preacher, and I don't mean to be that way, but I believe there's a lot to be taught, and I don't like sermonettes for Christianettes. So we're going to start this in Romans 8:36, and it's out of my translation, and so you won't be able to read this in your King James Bible. That translation is available if you don't have it. You can just message me, and I can tell you how you can get it. But in Romans 8:36, it says, "It is my mandate, mission, and ministry engraved in my whole being for your sake." And so I like that, because what we do is we do for the sake of others. If you're a spiritual seeker, a mystic today, you're not doing it for yourself. That's what we used to do. And back when we came to church and joined the church, we always went there for ourselves. And, Jesus said it's better to give than to receive. And that really applies in that. So he said, I and my fellow ministers offer our lives to you daily, because our mandate, we are accounted as non-resisting fodder for the butchery of those who are mindful of the Mosaic law. And Sunday, when I first taught this, some of the women didn't know what fodder is. And fodder is like firewood. It burns the fire. And so verse 37 says, nevertheless, in all this distress and all this maltreatment and all these life threats, these things, more than those who do them, are subdued by eternal contact with our divine mind, which Jesus revealed in this resurrection. And he said, you can live your life based on these facts, and they are facts. So the traducing actions are powerless because of our victory over them, which is what he said, which has been revealed by Jesus expressing his mandate, his mission, and his ministry. So Father is the one who eternally loves us. And Jesus was victorious in what he was mandated to do. Likewise, we are victorious in what we are mandated to do. So when I was reading those scriptures, that's what popped out to me, is mandate, mission, and ministry. Many years ago, when Father really spoke to me, to my thoughts, and really told me what I would be doing, I heard mandate, mission, and ministry. So I followed it all my life. So pillar number 32 is each of us has a unique mandate, mission, and ministry in our lives that we are meant to fulfill. And whether it's through personal relationships, whether it's careers, ministry, but a mother or father or whatever, we all have a responsibility to use our talents and our abilities for the greater good and make a positive impact in the world. And I believe that is very important for us. One of my friends that I used to work with, he was one of my employers with Service Corp International. He's retired, and he put a post on Facebook today how he really he had an experience where he was at a restaurant and he saw a woman that looked like she was in distress. And so, he kept getting attracted to looking at her. So finally he walked over to her and he said he never has $100 bill in his billfold, but his pocket, but he did that day. And he began to talk to her and ended up, he handed her that $100 bill to help her. And he realized that he was praying to God. She was praying to God for help. And he knew that Father was using him to be the answer. And so I think it's a pretty important thing for us to realize that we are answers to people's prayers. We are messengers. And again, I can't tell you what kind of mandate, mission, and ministry you have in your life, but you probably know it already. So the mission, mandate, ministry Father gave me in 1998 never ceased. And I can tell you all three of them have been exponentially increased. And if I could put one sentence in what I do, my ministry is to correct people's ideas, their identity. And if you would agree with me, practically the whole world has a mistaken identity. And so let me help Ivan and them. For some reason, they're not able to get on to where they can see or share. So we've lost Judy, and PETA is not there either. So, all right, well, we'll just continue on. So if the people would listen, that's the problem. If the people would listen to comforter messengers, if you would, it could bring them great help, because living with a mistaken identity is literally living carnally, if you would, living out of the carnal realm, living out of the five senses, living out of the five major systems of the world for your control. And when I was writing this, I was reminded years ago, I was teaching in the old Outlook books, and I was teaching about the Philistines, and I looked the word Philistine up, or the name, and it means to roll in the dust. And basically, metaphorically, roll in the dust suggests it's a state of despair and submission and defeat. And if you would admit it, that's basically what much of the world's in today. They're in despair and they feel defeated. They look at the political system, the religious system, the medical system, the financial system, even the social system are failing them. And so in a sense, one of my worship leaders wrote a song when I taught this once, and she was talking about rolling in the dust, living as carnal as any man can. And that's where most people have been. So they need help, and they're praying for help. And if you're a comforter messenger and you know what your mission and mandate and ministry is, then you can be of help, whether it's one person or a large amount of people. And so overall, this meaning of rolling in the dust experiences and highlights the importance of humility, the importance of surrender to spiritual renewal. Because if people are in the face of adversity and oppression, really it's not a power. And we don't give it a power if we will seek after spiritual renewal and become a seeker of spiritual truth. So people who do not know their valid mandate, mission, and ministry, what happens is they only follow the surface level of the word that was wrongly translated by many people. And all it does is produce death to their true meaning of Scripture. And it's really, I have a lot of people in my life, a lot of friends in my life here in Oklahoma City, and they just can't follow this. It's very difficult for them. I try to share things to them, excuse me, and it just kind of goes over their head. And then they'll quote Scripture to me, like the wages of sin is death. And that brings a lot of fear to people. So one of my friends told me that the other day, and I just said, well, you know what? The best way to say that is when I think myself to be alone and separate from Father, then I find it difficult to express my true Christ nature. And in a sense, if you're not expressing that true Christ nature, then you're dead to the things of the Lord. I need to change this view where I'm on here. So let me do that real quick. Okay, there. So this understanding that we teach and that I'm teaching about your mandate, mission, and ministry, it doesn't bring fear. And that's what's important for people is if you're wherever you're at, what kind of fellowship you're in, if it's bringing fear to you, then they're not bringing spiritual truth to you. So if you're reading in a scripture or verse or feel a strong sense of condemnation or separation from Father, you can know that is not spiritual truth whatsoever. So don't embrace it. So to know Father in the Scripture, what we want to do is we look below the surface level of the word, and we discover the spiritual intent of each word, each name, each paragraph, each story, numbers, colors, everything reveals spiritual truth. And there's ways of finding those. There's some books like Numbers. I have a book that gives me spiritual understanding of numbers. There's lots of teachings about colors. And Peter, you'll like this. There's a lot of teachings about jewels, what every stone represents. The Bible talks about that. So then that's when you can begin to function out of who you are. So since we're using the Apostle Paul's letter to Romans, particularly chapter 8, it would be good to know just a little bit about Paul. And there's an entry for Paul in one of my biblical dictionaries that states his name comes from Latin, which means restrained, constrained, lessened, and made small and little. And see, before he was Saul, and Saul, all his meaning means a lot of things like big man, tall person, whatever. But this is surprising, given that he wrote many letters in the New and Outlook Perception books, and not all of them are attributed to him. The book of Hebrews, I believe, was written by Paul, but it's not attributed to him, and they say they don't know who wrote those. But he's responsible for much of that teaching, and also reaching out to the Gentile world. And the Gentiles are just non-Jewish people. That's all they were. So we need to know three things to understand Paul's historical and metaphysically his mission, his mandate, and ministry. And Paul's mission was to conquer the will, if you would, and the intellects of the Greeks. Luke was the writer of Acts, and he put in there that his mission was to the Jews and who lived outside of Israel. And that was not true. And I think it was distorted for political convenience when they translated, if you would. But we learn from Paul's letters that his mission was to the Roman Gentiles. So when Paul declares in Acts 25:11, I'm appealing to the emperor, he's not just talking about the unjust treatment that's received from the political system. He's basically talking about the world order that they had. And he was appealing that there's a new world order, and that new world order is the kingdom of God. It's the way, the truth, the life that Jesus came to share. And see, that was Jesus's mandate. Jesus talked about a way of living. He talked about the truth of living, and then he talked about the life. And that's why he said, I came to bring you an awareness of life and life more abundantly. He did not bring life because we already had it, but the way they translated it, they implied that we didn't have life and that Jesus brought life. So Paul's belief shows true missionary zeal. And when the governor says you're out of your mind, Paul replies, I'm speaking sober truth. So like Jesus before him, he questioned the entire world order, the way it was going. And he tried to teach people again the better way to live and the truth and their oneness with Father. So Paul becomes conscious of this valid spiritual order being, and he sets out to challenge civilization. He sets out to challenge the carnal way of living, if you would. And Jesus proclaimed the same thing all throughout that area. So Paul's mission was to open the word of truth in parts of the consciousness which was never realized. And that's what we're doing today. That's what people that are becoming comforter messengers, if you would. They're mystic, they're seeking spiritual truth. Then part of our ministry is to open people's awareness that it will affect their will, it'll affect their desires, it will affect their understandings. And basically, those are the two of those powers that I talk about, or that we have, that's in our forehead. And that was Peter for, we see Peter for faith and strength, and all those are in there. But basically, James was order, and we need our conscious awareness to be brought to order. And so that's what Paul was doing, and he was practicing that in all of his teaching. So the spiritually interpreted missionary journey of Paul represents this activity of the word of truth that comes out of our heart awareness, and it does that in every individual. And even as the mission of Paul was to spread Jesus's teaching throughout the world, so it would be our mission to do that. And basically, it needs to be spread in our world. So that verse that we see in the Bible says that go into all the world and preach the gospel. Well, that's the divine mind domination over our being. And that's what I want. I want the divine mind. I want the very spirit of God to dominate my entire being. And so I wrote this when I was studying, and I put, if you have not allowed you to preach the gospel to your soul, then how can you preach the gospel to your world? And I hope that makes sense to you, because we need to receive with meekness ourselves the engrafted word of God, or the engrafted logos that really produces this activity that's flowing through us. And so once we do that, then we can begin to bless other people. So when our soul, like Jeremiah, has a fire in it, which is the logos in our bones, which cannot be shut up, we, like Paul, with spiritually inspired wisdom and knowledge, we have this understanding, and we enthusiastically preach the logos. You know, I've had Donna many times when I'm out traveling or out walking, going to grocery stores or whatever, and I invariably see somebody and I begin to share. And Donna kind of says, Roy, do you have to do that everywhere you go? Well, I can't help it. It's like Jeremiah, it's like fire shut up in my bones, and I have to let it out of me. And so in the Message Bible translation of Jeremiah 20, verse 9, I'm going to go through his calling in a little bit, but it states, Jeremiah says this, but if I say, forget it, no more God messages for me, the words are fire in my belly, a burning in my bones. I'm worn out trying to hold it out, and I can't hold it back any longer. And that's the way Paul was, and that's the way Jesus was, because they fought him and they killed him. They killed Paul by stoning him, and he rose himself right back up from the grave. And there are other instances that I believe that he was killed, and he tapped into who he was, and he knew who he was, and he experienced the resurrection while he was in his body. And that's the one thing he always wanted to do. So this verse can be interpreted as the idea that once we have truly experienced and connected with our divine mind, the logos within us, it becomes a burning passion that cannot be contained or silenced. It is a force, if you would, that ignites within us like a fire that cannot be put out, and it propels us to share our experiences with others. And to me, that is a real kind of a sign that if the word is burning in you so much, and you're desirous to share it with other people, then you do have a mission, and you do have a mandate, and you do have a ministry. And Father wants that to become stronger and stronger in your life. And so that line that says, I'm worried of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot suggest that there would be an urge there. It's a message that's burning to get out. Sometimes it's a message that you dreamed about. Sometimes you were studying and something just lit your fire, if you would, and you realize, I've got to get this out. And many times, family, there are people out there that are praying, that's in your world, and they're praying for Father to help them, and you end up seeing them in 7-Eleven or Walmart or whatever, and the Spirit of God nudges you towards that person, and you may have just the answer that they need, because you're who they are praying for. They're praying for messengers to come to them and to help them. So what Jeremiah said speaks of this transformation or transformative power of a deep spiritual connection, and the undeniable urge to share that connection with others. And he reminds us, when we tap into the spiritual power, and I don't even like to use the word tap in, when we're connected with our divine mind, then we become agents of positive change in this world. Because when you look at this world, it seems helpless. And all people are doing, particularly Western evangelical Christianity, is they're saying, when's God going to come do something? Would you agree with me? That's all they're looking for, is God to come do something, or a rapture, or Jesus to come back. And they have no idea that they have dominion, and they're the ones that are withholding from this earth what this earth needs. And so thus the first part of our calling, our equipping, is sending us on a mission. And again, I can't tell you what yours is. I've had many people call me over the years and say, what do you think my ministry is? Well, I can't tell them. You know, I can recognize it when a person's functioning in it, but you already know. But you must ensure it's not a mission that's formed out of non-spiritually controlled desire and will, because too often people do that, and I've done it in the past, and it kind of gets me in trouble. I've had this great idea of letting my house go or selling it and moving into a church parsonage and being an associate pastor, and it didn't work. And fortunately, the pastor's wife stopped it, and I'm glad they did. But we sometimes, our will and our desires are not controlled by a spirit, and they can really get us in trouble. So I listened to my mission instructions while studying the book of Jeremiah, and literally that's when it changed my life. I asked Father a question about Jeremiah, then I got calm and I got quiet, and I heard very distinctly with a clear understanding that Father said to me, I'm going to make you like a Jeremiah. And that never left me. And I was instructed to go back to Jeremiah chapter 1 and read his calling. And it's been like fire in my bones ever since then. And that was 35 years ago. And I never stopped because I can't stop. So let's look at these. In Jeremiah chapter 1, we discover the word Father speaking to Jeremiah's thoughts. And first of all, that's where Father speaks to you some. Right out in your thoughts. Sometimes, particularly in the Old Outlook book, sometimes other people say, well, I heard Father speaking from the heavens. Well, if you look at the metaphysical understanding of the word heavens, it's right up here. It's in your thoughts, and it's in your hearing inside of you. So Father speaks to him in verse 5, and he says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Now, nations always means the awareness of man. That's what it means. It's not, I'm sending you to China or Africa or whatever, but it's to the awarenesses of man. And a prophet is a person that proclaims truth. They're not prophesying, thus saith the Lord, God's going to do this or God's going to do that. They're literally people that bring truth. So the prophets and the Old Outlook books, they brought letters to people. They brought truth to them. Father would speak something to them, and then they would give it to them. So the phrase, before I formed you in the womb, suggests that our existence is not just limited to our physical bodies, but it extends in eternity. We are in with Father in eternity. There's no time in eternity. There's no time in spirit. So we've always been with Father. Maybe not in these physical bodies, but spiritually, we've always been with the Father. And if something happens and we were to lay down our bodies, we're still with Father, and there's no change whatsoever, except for I believe we experience a glorified body at that time. And I know that because I've had many people see their loved ones after they left their bodies. And so the verse also speaks to the concept of a divine mission, mandate, ministry. The phrase, I appointed you a prophet to the nations, suggests that each of us then has that calling or that mission in our life, something that we can contribute to the heart awareness of people in our world. And this calling is not just a product of change, a chance of circumstances, but it's preordained from the aspect of our spiritual journey. I believe when you were at your inception, when that bright light of spirit exploded, when the sperm hit that egg, I believe at that moment, your DNA was implanted in you with a purpose, a mission, a mandate, and ministry. And what I call DNA is divine nature activity. It was placed inside of every one of us. So ministry, again, is not always church ministry. A lot of people, they look at pastors and say, oh, I want to be a pastor. Well, you might think on that because it's not an easy job. I had one guy tell me, you have a really easy job. He said, you preach on Sundays, the rest of the week you can go fishing and golfing and just do what you want. Well, they're kind of deceived, I think, a little bit. But again, like I said earlier, it can be your career. It can be your passion. It can be family life. It can be an artist. It can be a job somewhere that you just love and you're able to bless people in that job, like a nurse, a doctor, or whatever. So overall, the metaphysical understanding of Jeremiah 1:5 emphasizes the importance of recognizing ourselves as spiritual beings, first of all. We need to quit saying we're human. I still see people say, I'm just a human, and you're not. That's a term that was used a long time ago. Old dictionaries show it, and it talks about, it calls them animals, it calls them beasts, it calls them people with no understanding. And I believe in the days where, particularly in African American, when they made them slaves, I believe they saw them that way. And they just called them mere humans or whatever. But you are spirit. You are son of God. You are holy. When people ask you who you are, you don't have to say that to them, but you need to know who that you are. And I have no problem in telling them I am a son of God and you are a daughter of God. And I've never had one say, well, that's not true. So as I've stated often, one can never experience true joy or happiness when giving out without giving out who they are to others. Again, Jesus said it's better to give than to receive. And he's not talking about money. He's talking about who you are. Give out of who you are. I've done that all my life and I love it. I would rather give a painting to somebody than sell a painting to them. Or I would rather give a book than sell a book. You know, sometimes you can't give them all away, but I enjoy doing that. So it's our place to give the gospel of love to all people without expecting anything in return, because that's what the gospel is love. And so we literally need to love all people. Then in verse 6, it said, then oh Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I'm a child. Well, Jeremiah needed to know Father always qualifies those who he calls. So Father is the source, not our age, not our qualification. Jeremiah, I think, was about 14 when this happened. So I'm sure he was a little insecure about it. But Father let him know that he was going to take care of it. And, you know, I have a doctorate degree in theology, masters in theology, masters in biblical counseling, biblical studies. And I've studied for 35 years. And I have to tell you, none of that is what I can lay my foundation on for what I know now. None of that has anything to do with what I teach now. I got those degrees because I wanted to learn where people were coming up with their doctrines, like their doctrine of Trinity and different things like that. Because it's not good just to say, get up and say that's not true, unless you know why it's not true. So I can draw from that knowledge, but I have to tell you, I'm not qualified by what, I'm qualified by a who. And you are too. Father is the one that opens us up. Father is the one that opened me up as a window of the divine mind, which is heaven. And Father consistently pours me out a blessing to people, and I enjoy it. And I know it all comes from Father. So you are to continue to speak, basically, Father told me, what I give you. So I'm a guide, if you would. You know, a lot of people are looking for guides. And if you're a messenger and you're studying and you're hungry for spiritual things, then you can be used as a guide yourself. And what do? We guide people to spiritual truth. And so all I could say when Father said that is, I will. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know when he was going to pour me out, but I knew what I needed to do is study and study and study and listen and study spiritually and listen spiritually. And Father is the one that opens the door and makes you like a window of heaven. And again, heaven is what's true in your divine mind. So this reveals the importance of attentively listening. Some of you guys watching me right now, people that are watching me on Facebook, that you should know the word obey in the Bible actually means to listen attentively. It doesn't mean you have to obey a bunch of rules and regulations, but you need to listen attentively. And I always say be able to repeat what was said, because too many times people hear Father say something, but they think he says something else. And same thing with us. I've said something to people and they thought I said completely something different. So we need to make sure when we're listening to Father, we listen attentively, we pay attention to what's going on. And just as Jeremiah was instructed to go to everyone, Father sent him to, and to speak, we can benefit from this divine inspiration that realizes that Father said that he would put his words in his mouth, which we'll read here in just a minute. And so Nehemiah and Jeremiah and Isaiah and David and Daniel and many people, they begin to question their theology, and they begin to listen to Father, and things begin to change in how they minister to people. And particularly David realized that God didn't want any sacrifices at all. After he had done what he did with Bathsheba and her husband, he came to the Father very repentant, and he said, if you wanted sacrifices, I would give them to you, but you don't. All you want is a man with a contrite heart. And so that's important for us to understand that. And so again, in verse 8, Father said, do not be afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord. So that emphasizes Father's inward protection and that guidance for Jeremiah and for us, to carry out our prophetic mandate, mission, and ministry. Father is in us. Father is with us. Father doesn't just give you a mandate and then leave you alone. Father's in you, and he's guiding you, and he's your guide. And so metaphysically, physically, this verse can be interpreted as a reminder that we too have this divine presence and this guidance within us, and we should not be afraid to pursue our life's purpose. So many people are afraid today to do anything, and they can't walk up and talk to a stranger. They can't get up on a pulpit and say something because of fear. And really, they don't know that God's with them, because the Bible says if God's for you, who can be against you, or what can be against you? So when when we face challenges along the way, we can trust in the power of the Father within us to protect us and to deliver us from all kinds of fear that would come against us. And I can tell you, Father has been with me on my path all my life, and I didn't know it. But today, I know without a shadow of a doubt, if I was called to stand in front of 1 million people and teach, I could do it with no problem. Because what I know without a shadow of a doubt. And I'm not afraid to say what I know. So this brings us again, it calls us to action, to not rely on your strength and your wisdom, but rely on Father's strength and Father's wisdom, rather than having a limited understanding as you navigate life's challenges. Because there are challenges to come. People will try to resist you. People will traduce you. I've had people tell me before that in fact, one of my lifetime ministers told me he didn't see me as a pastor. I needed to go back to the furniture business and just be a salesman. And I just looked right in his eyes and I said, brother, you didn't call me, Father called me. You don't have the authority to say that. And I know who called me. And so you have to know who it is that's guiding you along this path. Then verse 9, it can be understood as a symbolic representation here. It says, the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said unto me, behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. So this is a representation of the idea that when we connect with our divine nature, we can accurately speak, and we can express divine wisdom and knowledge and understanding and truth. And sometimes you will be shocked at what comes out of your mouth. You'll be shocked when somebody asks you a question and the answer just comes and you're able to speak with authority. And the touch of the Lord's hand on the speaker's mouth represents this awakening, if you would, of this inner divine nature, which enables us to speak with authority and speak with clarity. When Jesus spoke, the people were amazed. When he was 12 years old and he went into the temple and he talked to the doctors of the law, they were confounded by what he knew and what he said, because he tapped in to divine mind. He listened to the scenes, he listened to his mom, and then he's very quickly superseded their understanding, and he was beginning to speak as the voice of one. So this implies that the speaker, again, is now a channel for divine communication and a channel for divine inspiration. And this can also be interpreted as a encouraging message for anyone who seeks to share the message of love and truth, because it helps you open yourself up and allow the Spirit to make you a powerful agent of positive change. And so when you get to this understanding, you can walk through this world and know who you are and realize that you're an agent of life and you're here to help people. I told somebody the other day, I came for you. You know, I remember that movie where Jesus was talking to Mary Magdalene and he said, I came for you. And so when somebody's making a withdrawal on me and I know it and I speak truth, and I know my whole day's purpose at that time is I came for them to help them. So verse 10 now. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and the kingdoms to root out and pull down and destroy, throw down, build and plant. So the metaphysical understanding of this verse is that it speaks to the power of the spoken logos. In this case, Father is empowering Jeremiah to use his logos words to root out anything that's not aligned with Father's will. Well, that would be speaking the truth. And there's a lot of things that need to be dug up, tore out, pulled out, rooted out. And what it is, it's the lie. It's the great lie is what I call it. It's the mistaken identity. It's the false belief systems. So when you come with truth, then your path forward is to uproot and destroy any negative influences, again, which is a false belief system. So at that time, Jeremiah is also given the power to build and to plant, which represents the ability to create in the receptive person a spiritual heart awareness. And that's why I love my ministry. I love when people come to my home and people on the internet, because I know that I'm building up their awareness. And it blesses me when people write me back, or they message me, or they call me, or we FaceTime, and they tell me what they're learning, and I can tell that it's been received and they're embracing these truths. So this verse is a reminder that our Logos-inspired words have power and can release the creative spiritual activity that reveals the law of the Spirit of abundant life, and all who hear, believe, and embrace what is heard. And so we should always strive to use our words wisely, with intention, in alignment with the Logos words that we hear from Father. And I had a good example of this week. I used to manage Bob Mills Furniture in Oklahoma City. I was the general manager, and Bob Mills and I were very good friends. And I ended up leaving him for a better job, at higher pay. And about 6 months after that, I ran into him at a restaurant, and we were talking, and I told him how I was having some struggles physically, and that I was trying to lose weight, just talking about that, whatever. So here we are almost 35 years later, or 30 years later, and my employer at Dignity Memorial Funeral Home was there with his wife shopping, and they saw Bob Mills, and they went up to him. He did, and he told him, he said, we have a friend in common. And so he told him that it was Roy Richmond, and Bob said, Roy Richmond, he said, did he lose that weight he was always trying to lose? I thought, what? But that's the last word that he heard from me. And so he carried that for 30 something years. And then that's the first thing he said about me and asked about me. So I don't know if that happened just for me teaching this, but it really makes me understand the importance of the words that we say to people, because literally they go on and on and on. And so we want our words to be words of blessing. We want our words to be spiritual words. So I asked this question: what are the qualities of a person that's on a mission? Because a mission, mandate, and ministry is very important. And so the qualities of those is they are driven by a sense of purpose and are willing to put in the necessary effort to achieve their desired outcome. They're not just sitting around waiting for it to happen. I did that for years. I knew that I had a calling on my life. I knew I wanted to be a minister, but I just kind of worked, supported my family, and I was just waiting for the Father to do something. But I wasn't proactive. And so a person with a mission, they're proactive, they're confident, they're resilient, and they're not easily deterred by obstacles or setbacks. They don't break down. They don't cry at every little thing that happens, but they keep their head up and they stay strong. A person on a mission is passionate about what they do, and they're committed to seeing it through to the end, no matter what challenges they face. So you can tell them, you can't do that. You can tell them, you can't say that, and they will do that, and they will say that. And my wife's a great example of that, because she's always telling me I can't do something or I can't say something, and I do it. You know, I've returned a lot of things to businesses, and she said, you can't return that. And I just the other day, after all these years, I was returning something, and she said it again, you can't do that. I said, honey, how many times are you going to tell me that? And so I went out the door, and I went, and they exchanged it just like I wanted them to. So we're the kind of people that we don't hear the word can't. And I don't like the word can't, because I can do all things through contact with Father that strengthens me. And I know how to walk up to a person and smile and say something nice to them and get them to laugh. And then when you do that, they're going to help you, and they're going to do what you need them to do. So Paul perfectly exemplified his mission and all he did, and said his greatest desire, as I said earlier, was to experience resurrection life in his body, and he did. And if you're not listening to it, Kay Fairchild is teaching a fabulous series on what about those bodies. And she talked the last few weeks about resurrection life in our body while we're alive. And I'm writing a book for her, and hopefully it's not going to be a long series. She said it's not, but hopefully I get it published soon, but it's really going to help people. So back to our study. Jesus and the Apostle Paul, as well as us and all other people, are born for supreme knowledge, for the welfare of the world, and its inhabitants. And I believe that with all my heart. We were born to live out of our divine mind. We were born to live out of knowing all things. The Bible says we have an unction with the Holy One and we know all things. Well, that word unction is the same thing as what Christ interprets to. It's contact. So we have contact with our divine mind. We have contact with Father, and we know all things. That's supreme knowledge. I was reading a Saturday morning some of the things that Buddha said. And Buddha said the same thing about himself. He said the ultimate knowledge comes from our divine mind. And so one cannot enter this mission without function out of the divine mind and wisdom and understanding. So within your soul, you, because that's who you are, you have all you need for your mission. You lack nothing. And like I say, you have to function out of spiritual wisdom, spiritual knowledge, and spiritual understanding. Because spiritual wisdom, spiritual knowledge, spiritual understanding won't let you just jump out and sign a contract for thousands of dollars when you're not ready for a building or you're ready for that. You have to allow those things to come to you. And so we lack nothing, and there's nothing we can't do that Father's given us. So after all, you are a son, you are a daughter of Father, and the son and daughter of Father have everything at their disposal if they would only know. And that's the thing we've got. I always talk to my wife about this. I understand these truths. I understand that we have divine health. It's ours. I understand we have divine function. We have divine financial provision. It's ours. But there has to come that knowing. And I remember in 1996, Father spoke to me. If I did some certain things, I allowed him to be the guide in my life. I didn't depend on my ability in the dust realm, if you would. I would never lack for money the rest of my life. And I heard that distinctive, and I knew it, and it's always come true. And my desire is to do it in every realm of life. And I think sometimes maybe some people's got to do one, some another, and then we all get together and we minister it out of what we know. So if you only have faith in your mission, then when resistance comes, your faith in your mission wanes, and often it's never fulfilled. So, but like Jeremiah, he knew that he knew. Does that make sense? You've got to know that you know. So Father spoke a clear word to him, and he listened attentively, and he followed Father's instructions, even when the people he went to rejected him and brought a lot of opposition in their life. How do you do that? Well, and you're studying the word and you're feeding on the word, you meditate a lot with it. The Bible says, be still and know, and it actually means to be calm and quiet. So you need to include some quiet time in your meditation, some quiet time in your study. When I'm in here writing, I don't just blast out 13 to 18 pages. I sit here sometimes for 30 or 40 minutes waiting and just kind of looking around and waiting for the Father to speak a word to me or to show me something, or something like a light shines on it. And then all of a sudden it guides me the direction that I need to go. And I don't stand up on the Sunday morning and say, I wonder if this is going to be good. I wonder if people's going to like it. I can't wait to give it out, because it's just like ice cream to me. I want you to have it. I want you to enjoy it. So Apostle Paul's mandate was to spiritually accomplish the spiritual consciousness in those that he taught. And his desire that he needed to plant in their consciousness was one power, one mind, one body, and one presence. And they're all the same thing. They're not separate. You can just superimpose them all over each other. Just like people say we're a spirit, we're a soul, and a body. No, we're one. And so, yes, our body is visible, but it's just spirit slowed down to visibility. So in the universe, there is a shared divinity of the divine mind in all persons, and there's a union in oneness. And Jesus revealed the eternal love of Father. Paul revealed the eternal love of Father, and that nothing at all can separate any person from this oneness with Father. Not even saying a sinner's prayer, not saying a sinner's prayer can separate you. You know, I went to a funeral the other day, and they had people get up and say a sinner's prayer because you want to make sure that when you die, you go to heaven. Well, even death will not separate you from Father. Even not following rules will not separate you from Father. So there's not one thing, and I defy anybody can make a statement of what can when it says nothing whatsoever. So The title apostle here spiritually speaks of active spiritual thoughts. That's what an apostle is. It's somebody that functions in actual active spiritual thoughts. In other words, they're not just for you, but they're active. They flow out of you. They function through you. Jesus conferred this title on the 12 that he sent out. He sent them out to teach and, yes, heal diseases, because some people wouldn't listen, but they also went out to heal people's awarenesses. So if you saw those 12 men with your physical eyes that he called apostles, you would think, who are they? How are they qualified? They're just silly fishermen or whatever, that thought that Jesus didn't look with a single eye. I mean, his physical eyes. He looked with a single eye, and he saw what was inside of them. He saw their mission, their mandate, and ministry in each one of them, and he knew that they would fulfill those. So Paul's mandate, mission, and ministry, all three the same, represent the word of the Spirit of truth by the power of the Logos. The converted Paul, which was Saul, becomes the most active thought in establishing Father's God throughout our being to all who will attentively hear. And that can take place in us too. So it's interesting that the entrance of Paul and his companions into Europe is symbolical of opening up the Logos again to the parts of consciousness where people need that. And there's no shortage for that in the world. And so let me go ahead here just a little bit. We have more people than not that are not receptive to what we're saying. Would you guys agree with that? And what you mean? More people than not. And so we've got to say, Father, help me to be sensitive to people that are. Help me to be sensitive to people that are hungry for things. I've had people in Walmart say, I really needed to hear that today. I tell people that I love them. I don't walk around and tell everybody I love them. But people that I talk to, sometimes I'll just say, I love you. And then I'll say, if we can hate people we don't know, why can't we love people we don't know? And I've had several people say, thank you, because I haven't been told that I love you in a long, long time. And people need to hear that. And so the other night, or actually Saturday while I was studying, I've been studying for probably 6 hours. And I was researching, and I felt I really needed a nap. So I went into sleep for about 30 minutes. I ended up sleeping 4 hours. And as I was, before I woke up, I began to think about my grandchildren and my thoughts. And 4 of them were not raised in a traditional Christian environment. The other 5 were in a measure, and their parents, my children, were raised in a Christian environment, Madonna and me. But at the beginning of college, one of our children began to doubt the legitimacy of the beliefs of the Bible and the teaching. Him and his wife read the entire Bible, and they just determined that it wasn't real, and they concluded there was no God. So they didn't teach their children Christianity, and they allowed the children to seek the truth themselves. Our other 2 children kept those values until their later years, and then they began also to question the version of God that we followed, because I was doing it too, and they were listening to me some. And so none of my grandchildren called themselves Christian. And when I said that Sunday, some of the members kind of looked shocked, but they don't call themselves Christian. So I began to think about that in my sleep, and I began to ask Father about that a little bit. And I slowly awakened, and while hearing in my thoughts, I heard all of them, my children, my grandchildren, my children's children's children, are being protected from the teaching of religiosity. Does that make sense? It's just like Jesus was protected from religiosity. Gabriel went to Mary and said, keep him from the Jewish teachings, keep him from religious teachings. And so she did, and she taught them what she learned from the scenes. And then when he was probably 5 or 6 years old, she took him out into the Arabian desert, and the scenes taught him. And again, he's quickly superseded the knowledge of all those people. Why? Because he was protected from religiosity. And so these people that are not in church today, don't be upset about it. Don't try to get them in church. Don't try to get them in religiosity, because they won't be receptive. They're being called out, if you would. And there's people today that Kay and I and other people are ministering to today that you would think never would come to these truths. And when they do, you find out they've never been in church. And I've shared a lot of things to people before. And I said, where did you learn that at? And they said, well, God showed it to me. Do you go to church? No. Well, a religion person would say, well, how would God show you that? But God is speaking to people all over the world, and they're waking them up. So when I fully awakened and I heard those words, I immediately remembered one of the chapters that Kay taught from. And what about those bodies? And it's Isaiah 59:21. And Father said, as for me, this is my covenant with them, saith the Lord. My spirit, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge that is upon you, and my words which I have put in your mouth shall not depart out of your mouth, nor out of the mouth of your seed, nor out of the mouth of thy seed's seed, saith the Lord, from henceforth and forevermore. So that's a sure word. When we minister these things and we're sharing these things, our children's going to hear them. And it's going to be our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and their children's for eternity. And they will hear the eternal Logos, the creative spiritual activity that reveals the law of the spirit of abundant life. And you say, well, what about those that get sick? What about those that lay there? Well, they're going to hear it, because when the body lays down, their spirit zooms, and I don't know where it goes, but I know it's with the Father, and they're going to hear all those truths. But I'd rather have them hear it while they're alive. So spiritually, Isaiah 59:21 can be interpreted as a covenant between the one and only Father source and mankind. Father's spirit, which is essence, our divine love and guidance, is in us, is upon us, it's around us, and it's connected. It's in our children, and it's in our children's children and our children's children. So furthermore, Father's words, which represent the truth and wisdom, are in the universe, and they're placed in our mouths, and better said, our voice of one. And this means we can speak words of divine inspiration, divine truth, divine love into existence. And literally, we can speak those things over people. When you have a friend, maybe that they're struggling, they're not in peace, they're in fear, you don't have to be with them to do this, but you can speak these things to them with power, with an authority, and you can bring that into existence. For next time you see them, they'll be saying, I don't know what happened, but something overwhelmed me, and the joy of the Lord came upon me. And that's important for us. So the Bible says these words will not depart from us, and they're there for us. So in this way, we become a vessel through which Father's Spirit and words flow into our world as we follow our mandate, mission, and ministry. We're empowered to create, if you would, a reality that's reflecting the divine idea of the Father, which includes love, peace, joy, and harmony. And this world needs that desperately. So we align ourselves with the divine. We become channels for its infinite wisdom and blessing to flow to receptive people who are not so ingrained with religiosity that refuse to hear. And they're around you, and you will find them, and Father will open you up and pour out of you a blessing that's not room enough to receive in just them. You've got enough for your whole world. And so that's important for us to understand that. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's a little hard for me to teach to a camera, without people in front of me, but I've got 3 or 4 people here with me, but I hope you enjoy it. And it's a blessing to me to study these things out. And again, every one of you has a mission, a mandate, and a ministry. And I don't know what it is, but I can tell you, until you get involved in that, you're never going to be as happy as you are now, because there's nothing like giving out spiritual truth. So I pray that over all of you. I said Sunday morning, in the middle of the night, I prayed the most awesome prayer over my congregation in my house and my congregation around the world. I was blessing you. I was speaking things over you. I was speaking that you would be receptive to what Father wants for you. I was speaking that God would lead you to people that are receptive. And when I woke up, I don't have any idea what I said. I was going to write it all down and speak it out. But I spoke it out in the spirit. And I believe it's been realized by every one of you. And life is going to continue to evolve and evolve more and more until you are that comforter messenger in your world that's out there blessing people. So God bless you. I'm going to pause on this for just a minute. I'm going to take it off of Facebook so you guys on Zoom can stay here a minute. And if you have any questions or comments, I want you to say them. So give me just a minute. Let me stop the recording.